Hi everybody, I'm Felicity. I'm a satisfaction coach, yoga teacher and reflexologist who is empowering people to live a healthier, happier and more satisfied life that they don't need to escape from. And I'm going to talk about the yoga side of what I do today a little bit. Before I go into all that, tell me if you're watching on live or if you're watching on catch up as well, how you're doing. Say hello. It's always lovely to see your comments and stuff. Just make sure that you give Restream permission to see you, because then I know who said the comments that come through to me. So I've had a pretty bog standard normal week, but today I've been doing all my planning for the Flowcation, which is coming up starting tomorrow in 25 hours time. I will be going live in my Facebook group only. So you need to be in the Facebook group, and ideally you need to sign up as well, so I know who's actually doing it. Here is, in fact, I think the link's up in the description as well, but there's the link so you can come along to the Flowcation. And we're going to be doing 3 nights. We're going to do gratitude tomorrow. We'll talk about that. We're going to do savouring on Tuesday. And then we're going to talk about the flow state itself. So we're going to really get into our present moment. That's very much about what finding your flow is for me. It's about being very present and being very accepting as well of our current situation. So when we do find your flow in the Satisfaction Revolution, which is my membership, and we'll be starting on Find Your Flow in June. Doors are going to open for that on Wednesday. The first month is actually contentment and acceptance. So that'll be the first thing we look at. And then we do move through gratitude and savouring, and getting a flow state is a part of savouring as well. But I'll be talking very much about just giving you a little taster of what it's like to come into the Satisfaction Revolution for 3 days. You can have me every evening for 3 days, for the next 3 days. So yoga. Why do I do yoga? Why is yoga such an important part of what I do? And please ask me questions as well on this, because it's really interesting to hear what people's perception of yoga is. Quite often when I'm talking about the membership, people are a bit like, well, I don't do yoga, so can I be involved in it? And quite honestly, anyone and everyone can do yoga. Everyone should do yoga. The world would be a better place if everyone did yoga, basically. But, decent yoga that gets your brain involved, not just stick your leg around your head type yoga. That's acrobatics. It's not necessarily yoga. So for me, I guess it kind of was the acrobatic stuff that brought me to yoga originally. I first started doing yoga in 1998. It probably was. 98, 99, maybe 99, when it was all the rage. Madonna was doing it, and everyone could see Madonna's buff body and think, well, I want a bit of that one, even in my 40s. It's weird how she was kind of the same age as I am now. So, it was the whole Madonna thing. And Jerry Halliwell as well. I was a huge Spice Girls fan. So, huge Madonna fan. So these 2 women doing a lot of yoga was really influential on me. And, I was 20 years old, 21, very easily influenced. I thought, well, I'll have a bit of that. And Jerry brought out a couple of DVDs. So I bought her DVDs, and I used to do those yoga DVDs quite a lot. And they weren't bad, to be honest. Her teacher, whose name escapes me now. I think she's a pretty good teacher. So they were pretty good. They weren't too ridiculously ambitious. I kind of enjoyed doing it. Then I went to a few classes. I moved to London and did some classes, and it was just kind of like something that I did occasionally, depending on where I was in the world. When I went traveling, I would sometimes get on, I didn't have a mat, normally get on my sarong and do some yoga there, wherever I was. I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. It was just copying stuff that I learned in classes. And obviously this is pre-YouTube, or not pre-YouTube, but this is before you could very easily get yoga online. And then I moved to Preston 14 years ago. And I met my yoga teacher, who is still my yoga teacher, Debbie Farah. And it completely, meeting her was life-changing. I can't deny that. Because she introduced me into a lot more yoga, like a lot deeper yoga. And I kind of, certainly the first classes I was doing with her were athletic classes. I was doing Ashtanga yoga, which is the power yogas. There's a bit of jumping around and everything going on in there. I wasn't very good at it, but I was doing it. And it was yoga in a gym. So there's obviously a limited amount of anything else you can do that. But we connected. I think we were both planning on getting married the following year. So we kind of bonded over that. And I started she did a foundation course. So I started doing really in-depth yoga. Started doing meditation. Started looking at breathing practices. And started learning about the philosophy behind yoga and this whole massive other thing that yoga is, that isn't just making shapes on a mat. And that just blew my mind. Gradually, maybe not blew my mind, just expanded everything, And that's the idea of yoga, really. It's to expand the consciousness in many ways. So I just kind of like got more and more into it. I was going to a lot more of her classes. She was changing the way she was teaching as well, which is really interesting to see how your teacher rubs off on you. At the end of the day, she's been my teacher for a long, long time. I'm inevitably going to teach in a very similar way to her. So then I did my teacher training with her as well. I completed teacher training in just before lockdown. It's the easiest way to remember what year it was, 2019, or the end of 2019. And I'd also, while I've been doing my teacher training, or just a bit previous, was when I was doing a lot of starting to study into the science of happiness. And I did a workshop with one of Debbie's teachers, Peter Blackaby. He's a fantastic yoga teacher. And he started talking about neuroscience. And I suddenly thought, hold on, I've been doing all about neuroscience in the science of happiness. That's what a lot of the science of happiness is about. It's about how we can change our brain to be, it's how we can change our brain to be happier, effectively. And a lot of what Pete Blackaby and what Debbie talk about is neuromuscular rewriting and neuromuscular pathways. So whereas in our body, we might move in a certain way, and that might have worked for us a few years ago, but now, so for example, if you got an injury in an ankle, perhaps, to navigate your way around that injury, you might end up walking slightly differently. And then even though the ankle heals, you continue to walk differently. And that way that you're walking differently might start putting some pressure on a hip, for example. What we do on the mat in yoga, in the physical yoga practice, is find that, okay, a hip isn't working properly, or we're starting to get some pain in the hip. So how can we now again rewrite that neuromuscular pathways so that the hip is in less pain, so that we can completely change the way that we move, the way that we walk, so we're no longer putting that pressure on the hip, and that starts to alleviate that ailment. So we'd have done the rewriting when we injured the ankle, because the body would naturally say, well, I've got to avoid putting too much pressure on the ankle. And then, like I say, that we don't revert back unless sometimes we have to really consciously do it. And then trying to find more nourishing ways of moving. And for me, that's what the physical yoga practice is all about. I went through this when my back went. Had really, really bad problems with my back. I sometimes forget just how bad it was. In fact, I mostly forgot how bad it was until I had COVID a couple of months ago, and that seemed to re-exacerbate my back problem. But I could barely reach my feet to get my socks on. We talk, quite often people will say I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible, I can't touch my toes. I couldn't touch my toes while I was bending my leg, to put a sock or a shoe on, let alone touching my toes with my leg straight. That's how bad my back was. And it took a long, long time to find new ways of moving, new ways of standing, in order that my back, I don't know if it'll ever be 100% cured, but it certainly doesn't inhibit my movement. It doesn't inhibit my activities the way that it used to. It doesn't cause me anywhere near as much pain. I don't need to take any medication for it. So that's the physical side of it, but it does the same mentally as well. So one of the other real joys for me with yoga is it's kind of a double-edged thing. It gives me comfort. My yoga mat gives me comfort. It's a place of security. It's a place where I can go to, where I can just be in myself. And my yoga mat it's like it has a force field around it. And I'm actually very lucky. Obviously, I've got a yoga room now, which means I have a door. I have an entire room that can have a force field around it. But in particular, my mat has this force field, and it's like I can just leave the baggage outside of the mat, and I come to the mat, and all of the outside world is not relevant in that moment. It takes quite a while to have this mental, and it's not a discipline. It's just, again, it's rewriting your mental pathways to say to you, right, this is yoga time. This is time when you just spend time in your body and nothing else, just for these few moments. So it gives me that solace, I guess, and the peace to leave that baggage behind and just focus on myself. But conversely, it also gives me a place to inquire. And actually, there's a lot of talk of space and spaciousness within yoga. There's quite a few yoga teachers and tantra teachers who talk about creating space in order that answers can come. So if I'm always in my head about anxious things, things that I'm worried about, things I've got to do, my to-do list, things I've got to do for my business, things I've got to do for social, and yada, yada, yada. If you fill your head full of that stuff, there's never any room for you to drill down in. Sometimes there's never any room for you to drill down into why you filled your head full of that stuff. So with yoga, and this is how meditation works as well, if you can give yourself that space, that time away from everything, then the answers start to come, or the inspiration starts to come, or I almost want to say knowledge. That might not be the right word. The knowledge, perhaps, or the awareness starts to come. And there's lots of other things that relate from the science of well-being, of happiness, of satisfaction, whatever we're going to call it, and into yoga. So this chance to step back and be an observer of ourselves, and an inquiring observer, not in a cold way, but in a really curious way. It's like, why do we think like this? Why do I think like that? Why do I react in that way? If we can create some distance between what we do and pondering why we do that, sometimes we can start to see, oh, maybe that's not such a good thing to do. And then we can start to unpick it. We can start to change our behavior. And that's a lot of the techniques that I teach when I'm teaching on the Satisfaction Revolution. A lot of them are exactly that thing. It's about taking a step back, whether it's through journaling or meditation. They're the two usual ways we can be a bit more of an observer of ourselves. And the yoga texts, they talk about this everywhere, about the difference between the seer and the seen. I'm not going to get too deep into yoga philosophy tonight. The other thing that really kind of why I like to teach these two together is because it's never done. It's never completed. And it was one of the things that scared me a bit about teaching was, well, I don't know enough to teach yoga. And then I kind of realized that you can never know everything about yoga. And anyone who tells you that they do is either lying to themselves or they're lying to you. And this is why I balked on the word knowledge, because it's inner knowledge. It's stuff that you can't actually read in books. It's stuff that you have to experience in order to gain that knowledge. So I can read about reaching a state of nirvana all I like. If I've never actually experienced it, then I can't explain to you anything about it. I've only got very, very close, or what I think is close, once or twice, maybe a couple of times. But this is very fundamental to yoga. It's an experiential thing. And so is happiness, so is satisfaction. Everything I teach in all this stuff is, yes, there's statistics behind it. There's psychology studies, neuroscience studies behind a lot of this. But a lot of it is also stuff I've experienced myself, I've tried myself. So I like to think that a lot of this stuff comes from a place of honesty. And honesty is one of the key things of yoga as well. Being honest with yourself as much as anything. And it's never a done job. You can never, ever, with yoga, say, right, I've done that, completed, tick box, move on to something else. Because there'll always be something else to find out about yourself, or about your consciousness, or about the consciousness. And the same with happiness. You don't get to one point in your life and say, right, tick the box, that's done. Because it is kind of one of those things, if you take your eye off the ball, it'll start to drift away. So it's something that we need to be working on all the time. And I mean that work in a nice way, not in a scary, horrible, hard work way. It is something we should be considering all the time in our lives. How can this be more satisfying? How can this make me happier? More happier for a long run, rather than just in this moment right now. And yoga's the same. That's all I'm going to waffle on about tonight. Yoga is amazing. And it's actually not as complicated as it maybe even I make it sound. It's just interesting. You just, like so many other things, you come to it with a curious mind and an open mind, and it starts to give you some answers. So I hope maybe that some of that is food for thought. Don't be scared by something that involves a bit of yoga. And trust me, don't be scared about whatever movement we're going to be doing over the next couple of days. It's going to be, I'm not going to say everyone can do it, because there's obviously people with physical disabilities may well struggle with some of it. We're going to do day 1 on the floor, lying down on the floor. You don't need a yoga mat. We're going to do day 2 standing up, and we're going to do day 3 sitting down. You'll all be very, very welcome on the Flowcation. I would love to see you there. And if you do come along, I will see you tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock sharp in the Satisfaction Station. It's the only place that they're going to go out. Otherwise, have a really wonderful week. Next week might be a bit different. I won't say for 100% that I'm going to be on next week, but I've got an idea. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and I hopefully see you soon.